I've got a follow-up question here. I'm going to address, Shannon, I'll start with you this time. Have you ever been excluded as an expert? And if so, how did you handle that?
Well, thankfully, no, I have not been excluded. So,
Kev?
No, and a pea in the same pod is, have you ever had a Daubert challenge?
Well, I was going there.
And I have had one, but the court allowed me. The only way I knew about it is an attorney I was working with said, "Did you know you had a challenge?" No. Well, apparently somebody filed one and it never went anywhere, and he had done some kind of a search, and I'm like, okay.
How many of you have ever had a Daubert challenge? That's a federal. All right, that's in federal court, and then there's generally an equivalent type of challenge at the state court level. Couple follow-up points. One, if you aren't aware, there is a website called Daubert Tracker. If you are a member of the AICPA and belong to the forensic and valuation section, you have a free subscription. And you can go out and search on your name, and it will tell you whether or not there's been a challenge that's been recorded. And it's pretty, I've gone out every time I'm adverse to an expert, I go out and check to see if there's a record there. Now, it's not 100% accurate, so you still want to do additional research, but there's a quick way to find out if somebody's ever been subject to a Daubert challenge in the federal court level.
That concerns me less than doing the occasional Google search on your name. I have found articles that I was quoted in that I had no clue about, you know. Right. So that's another pea in the same pod. Check that out once in a while.
Right. All right. And another point is, I mean, previously, if you had been subject to a Daubert challenge or its equivalent and had been excluded as an expert, that was your death knell as an expert witness. You would never testify again. That has, in my experience and what I've observed with other experts around the country, seems to have relaxed a little bit, that I still see people who have been Dauberted previously continuing to testify and been accepted as an expert.
Don't you think with the changing rules of evidence, this is going to be...
It's probably going to be an evolving thing.
A bigger deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miles, do you have a
Even
comment
a
on
bigger
that?
So for the second edition of my book, I did a full search on forensic accountants as opposed to business valuation. I didn't search it because that wasn't the topic of my book. But there's not a lot out there. And in terms of just general forensic accounting, no CPAs have been Daubert challenged specifically. And my favorite, to go short, my favorite Daubert challenge story, I was calling Rob to the stand, and the opposing counsel, I think, was just practicing one. I swear to God, just practicing just to do it, and was voir diring Rob and asking these questions. And kind of stopped once the other lawyer said, well, in this case, you're doing X, Y, and Z, right? And Rob says, yes, and you hired me to do the exact same analysis last week. It was like, wait. Yeah. I was like, yeah, that kind of shut it down at that point on the old Daubert challenge, because you're attacking methodology if it's done well, not credentials. And so, but I was convinced this lawyer was just practicing one to get one and see how it went.
One thing to be aware of for the more experienced practitioners is if you testify, at some point you're going to be Dauberted. Okay? It's going to happen. I've had it done to me, and it was a situation where the other side, we had Dauberted their expert, and they truly deserved it. I helped write the challenge. The work was so poor. Well, then they turned around and filed a Daubert motion against us to use as leverage. All right? Yeah. The judge dismissed both of them. Both of us were allowed to testify at court, and then as judges typically, it was a bench trial, and as judges typically will do, they just said, well, I'll weigh the evidence. And that's typically what will happen. Rob?
There was a pretty good article that came out in NACFA, one of their publications a couple of months ago. They interviewed this fellow who does a lot more testimonies than I do, and he said he's been excluded 3 times. And so he did a survey of all the lawyers he works with on a regular basis. Says, why do you I'm getting so much more Daubert challenges these days? And they said, well, we do it on every case. Someone said, we just do it on every case now because you never know what side of the bed the judge is going to wake up on.
Yeah.
You know, they literally, I mean, that was just maddening, but apparently true.
The corresponding benefit. The forensic accountant or expert witness who can explain methodology, the techniques, the professional judgment for the choices to explain the why in addition to the what, sails into heaven.
Yeah.
And just does great. So the why is what's so vitally important, and being able to explain it, which is the reason why we all love Kevin, because Kevin teaches us the why every time he opens his mouth. And without Kevin, we don't know what our futures will hold.